Hello and welcome to the Northwood Podcast. I'm your host, Heath Jones. If you don't already know, the Northwood Podcast is produced by the All Indiana Podcast Network. The All Indiana Podcast Network features podcasts produced in Indiana, and many of them are about topics of interest to Hoosiers specifically. So you should check them out. You can find more podcasts made by the All Indiana Podcast Network at www.wishtv.com/podcasts, or you can type in www.allindianapodcastnetwork.com, and that will get you to the same place. And if you'd like to find out more about the church that I pastor, Northwood Christian Church, you can read more about us by visiting our website, which you can find at www.indYNCC.org. That's indncc.org. And there you can read about our ministries and a bit about our values, and also what times that we meet, how you might become involved. Also, if you'd like to receive regular email updates, simply write into our office administrator at admin@indncc.org, and you can be added to our emailing list. And lastly, we encourage you, please subscribe or follow, like, or leave a comment on our channel or on our video or on our podcast, wherever you find us, wherever you access us. These points of engagement could bring more traffic our way, so please, that could be your way of spreading the word, to like, subscribe, or if you're feeling especially spry, by leaving a review. But enough of this. Today, we are going to be considering the story of Doubting Thomas. And you may have heard of him. But first, we're going to take a moment to pause for our ads for our podcast audience. So here goes a pause for ads. And we're back. As I was saying before, today we're going to be going over the story of Doubting Thomas. You can find that story in the 20th chapter of the Gospel of John. But for today, we're just going to read verses 24 through 29 of the 20th chapter. That's John chapter 20, verses 24 through 29, and here goes. But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." I should perhaps have set up some context before I started reading. What you just read along with me comes just after Jesus had appeared to the other disciples, absent Thomas. And if this story sounds familiar, it should, especially for those who attend churches that follow the lectionary. The lectionary, if you don't know, is just a churchy term for selected scripture readings many churches follow throughout the course of the year. Usually, my church, although not always, it goes in 3-year cycles. Years A, B, and C, and each of those years has a different selection of readings so that things are varied up, so you don't encounter the same passages over and over again. Maybe every 3 years, but not year by year. And as I was saying, this Doubting Thomas story may seem familiar because it is included in the lectionary, but unlike the other suggested gospel readings that repeat every 3 years, the Doubting Thomas story is slated to be read every year, cycles A, B, and C, after Easter. The Sunday after Easter, that is what preachers are expected to preach. It seems like the church is trying to get out ahead of the doubts about our claims about Jesus' death and the resurrected power in God. But so here it is again, the story of Doubting Thomas. We read this story the week after Easter because after Easter, somehow we know people are going to have questions. So we point to the doubter, the patron saint of doubting, with assurance because Thomas came to believe fairly quickly. The story concluded in just a few sentences. Whew, crisis averted. So good old Thomas, let's bring him out once a year, dust him off, and laud him as the one who, yeah, sure, doubted, but then quickly got his head on straight. The community did not need to sit in the anxiety of doubt for very long. He makes us feel good, because here is someone who overcame his doubt and rejoined the disciples' club. I can remember sermons on this topic, the topic of doubt, the ones that I heard growing up in the church, and what to do with it, and mostly how to fix it. Remember doubting Thomas, the preacher would say, step back and go on. You see, Thomas doubted. It's okay to doubt. I think, well, good. I'm glad to have the preacher's permission to doubt. Although I'm wondering if religious communities aren't maybe as healthy as we might think if it comes as a revelation that it's okay to doubt. For most people, we just assume it's okay to doubt. In church, it can be a revelation to those sitting in the pews because of the many messages regarding doubt that have been either mixed on the topic or even hostile to the concept of doubt. I can remember how questions were handled in my Sunday school classes. If the right conclusions weren't reached, well, then we were being insubordinate. Doubt was read as unbelief, which was read as rebellion against God, and all that is ultimately true. But then we pull out good old Thomas once more, and at least once a year, and say, well, I suppose it's okay to doubt. Thomas did. Let's resonate with Thomas. But this is only possible for some because the story ties up with a nice resolution. We can talk about the doubters so long as we know that the end result is going to be that they come to belief. Thomas comes back around and everyone knows it. His season of doubt seems to be tied down to a very few days, and the story resolves quickly for us. However, there are many other stories I know where it does not conclude so tidily, where the doubt stretches to the very end with no conclusion that maybe we witness in our lifetime. I should also point out that Thomas did more than doubt. He flat out didn't believe. He told the disciples, I don't even doubt, I don't believe you. When I was a child, a woman went to my childhood church and her husband did not. Pretty common. One spouse goes, the other doesn't. It's a common story. He had his doubts. But that was okay for a short while. You know, every year we read about doubting Thomas, and so we're okay with him doubting for a time. We pray for him. We hope that he'll come to our church. We'll allow our doubting Thomases, but then 1 year went by, then 2, then 10. And after a time, it became clear he was never coming. For us, he could no longer be viewed as a doubting Thomas at that point, or even a prodigal son, but something worse. He was an unbeliever. This was to say he was morally suspect and in rebellion with God. So why does it have to be this way? You know, I was disturbed by this as a child. It should be always like the good old Thomas story, where the doubt is only for a time, maintained and controlled, and then the right conclusions are reached. This man who would not come to church to join his wife troubled me. What do we do when it doesn't come to a tidy resolution? And this is the case more often than not. And religious communities often respond with hostility towards the doubter. The Sunday school teacher may love to quote, "Blessed are those who have seen and not yet come to belief." Right there from today's story. The teacher may put down the text after saying that, and in effect, they're saying, doubt for a time, but a time comes for doubt to come to an end. Anchor your mind around these claims presented to you today. Amen. And the teacher wanted us to leave that class with certainty. But many of my friends could not, and often I could not. But we weren't given the same opportunities as Thomas was given. We had not had the opportunity to physically touch the wounds of the risen Lord. Jesus gave Thomas that opportunity. The disciples, if they had chided Thomas for his disbelief, as church folk often have, would have been wholly unfair, for they had They had been in the room when Jesus had made the first appearance. I wasn't, so forgive me my doubts. And these doubts are amplified as we try to mesh this story of resurrected life with our own experience of suffering and death. A loved one dies, and we are told by some disciple who has been in a similar place before, never fear. It's going to be all right. You just got to have faith. Don't doubt that God can resurrect your loved one and hold you both through this. I've been told things like that in moments of doubt and despair in my life. But if you haven't experienced Easter yet, those words can seem shallow or even like wishful thinking, even cruel in their confidence. So, in the meantime, for those doubting Thomases who have not yet found belief or even meager faith, the question becomes, will we allow the doubt of those who have not seen and do not believe to settle in and remain around us? Do we have the courage to allow Thomas into the room and remain in community with us, even if they never come to see it the way many followers of Jesus do? And for many churches, the answer has been made again and again, and the answer has been a resounding and hostile no. Today, I'm wanting to carve out room for doubt in this place. And actually, I want to laud honest doubt as preferable to blindly towing some party line. And I have had a long-standing relationship with doubt that has actually strengthened my faith. And for that, I'm grateful, and I would like to talk to you more about that a little bit later. But this has been made possible for me only because I found communities of other disciples, other Jesus followers, other journeyers along the way who encouraged my doubt and walked with me through my questions. Some even joined me in my doubt. Some even changed their minds and opinions because of my doubt. And I was changed by theirs. I should point out that the disciples stayed by Thomas in his doubt. I mentioned that briefly, but they didn't kick him out of the club. He says, unless I see it, I won't believe it. There's your exit out of church, but not for Thomas. Stays with the disciples. A week later, he's still communing with the disciples in the spaces that they share. He's still sitting in the pew, figuratively speaking, or at least he's still showing up to the occasional church function. The disciples' willingness to stay with Thomas and remain his friend in his doubt seems so different than so many other church communities I've encountered. But he remained living with the disciples, sharing life and breaking bread. So here is a doubter who is not excommunicated or cast out. There needs to be more room for doubt in church. A few years ago, I visited a young woman who was very sick, raised in the church. But don't worry, she told me. My faith has kept me this far. She told me that she had no time to doubt. No time to doubt was how she put it. She claimed that she had no doubt at all. No disbelief or questions through her ordeal. She was dying. She had cancer. She says that she had no time for those who doubt, even then. So I'm thinking, I'd better be careful. This pastor had better be careful because she's sitting across from someone, me, who often has doubts. I'm listening to this. She goes on to say, some people have come into this room who have caused me to question my faith. I think they're filled with the devil. There's something evil about them. And I said, where have you drawn your strength? She replied, well, when my faith has been weak. Before she was saying, it's never weak. Now she's admitting. Then she tears up. And I could tell that she was feeling guilty simply by naming her doubt, which she took to be a moral failing. So here was a young woman on a hospital bed with cancer. Imagine it, feeling weak and feeling ashamed in her weakness and in her doubt. So I asked a question. Do you think that when you feel weak, you are in some way doubting God? And she nodded, yes, through tears. There's guilt, shame. You could see it on her face. I said, it's funny, you talk about doubt and weakness because this week is the week when churches talk about doubting Thomas. This happened to correspond with the same week many years ago. And she remembered the story, being raised in church, and I pointed out that Thomas was not kicked out because of his unbelief. Rather, he continued to commune with the disciples, and in time, he was given what he needed. In time. In the meantime, I said, do not beat yourself up when you feel weak, and do not equate doubt with weakness. If your doubt is the best you can do, in time, God will give you what you need. This is where you find your faith. And that was where she found her faith. And that basically sums it up for me. In time, we will be given what we need. Faith finds us in the midst of, and actually because of, doubts. It rises sometimes in the face of doubts. Not that doubts are a bad thing. At least this has been my experience. Doubt has become for me a precious word. I think that one cannot fully appreciate what a gift it is to be able to doubt freely unless they have lived in a world like I had lived in which doubt is seen as a weakness or even as infidelity to one's God. The church community that held me in my youth had seemed to have as a goal the removal of any possibility of doubt. And in this world, one would talk about past doubts as an alcoholic might talk about previous lapses from sobriety. That's how bad it seemed. But I have discovered that doubt is the opposite of weakness. It takes courage to hold doubt and to sit with it. Self-criticism, self-examination, and doubt are the hallmarks of truth, honesty, humility, and courage. My acceptance and appreciation of doubt has been hard-won. My tendency to ask questions and to express doubts led me to trouble in my younger years. I can remember wrestling with the conflicts between my faith and reason and finding my doubts and my questions were they seemed to be, felt like to me, they were shunted aside, discounted, or oversimplified by easy answers and platitudes, unsatisfying answers and platitudes. I found myself a prisoner to my honesty and curiosity rather than rewarded for it. I was forced to bend my intellect and my lived experience in half so that I can fit my religious presuppositions into the ever-enlarging world opening up before me. One night several years ago, I came to a decision. So frustrated by this, I decided I had had enough. I said to myself, I will never be afraid of truth so far as I think I can see it. Wherever it is, I find it. And when a new fact presents itself, I will absorb it and assimilate it with all the other knowledge and assumptions I hold. And when something can be reasonably demonstrated to be true, I will believe it, even if it conflicts with a cherished and comforting prior belief. That's what I said to myself. And I said it to God. I can still remember what it felt like to stare up at the stars and speak these words to myself and up to God. God, if you are the God of truth, these words should not threaten you, I thought. And I don't think they did. And I have never regretted them. Since then, several beliefs have been cast down from their pedestals. And at times, my world had to reorient itself, or rather, I had to reorient my outlook towards the world as it was coming into newer and better focus. But it's been liberating, disorienting, but also joyous. I am no longer afraid of my mind, but rejoice in my ability to use it. The freedom to doubt has given me the ability to actually practice, get this, faith. We mistake faith for clear and certain knowledge. That's the problem. You thought that's what we were talking about, maybe. We are not faithful when we think we know all the right answers and believe in those facts with certitude. Probably when we take this line, holding all facts with certitude, we are being insufferably arrogant, I bet. Not to mention, we deceive ourselves into thinking we know more than we possibly can. So, no, asking Thomas to get his facts straight about Jesus is not the same as asking him to have faith in Jesus. There is a difference between having faith and knowing with certitude, and this difference is important. So here's a for instance to help elucidate the point, if that helps. For instance, I believe that my wife has two arms. not controversial. I don't put my faith in this claim or my faith in her 2 arms. I believe that she has these arms, much the same way Thomas came to believe Jesus had holes in his hands. But I have faith that my wife loves me. I can't see it or feel it, but I believe it's so through faith. And there are reasons I have for believing it, but in the end, her faithfulness is something I choose to take by faith. I can't put it in a bottle or certify it with facts. It doesn't come with a certificate of authenticity. This is just the lens through which I interpret our relationship. I hold this lens of faith out, and I interpret our relationship through this lens with the assumption that she loves me. Faith is like a lens through which I look at the world and its nuances, the things that I see around me, and they are put into a workable perspective. We hold up the lens of the gospel and look through it, not because we can prove what it claims with certitude, but because this lens helps us to make sense of the world. So I look through this lens, and I see by faith that an unjust world is a wrong one. I can't prove that, but I believe it by faith. By faith, I see that love is everywhere, and by it all, everything is being made beautiful. I see through this lens that there is a power in God that can call life from dead places. I cannot prove these assertions by certain knowledge, and I can easily see why someone else might not believe them. And we should make room for them. But to see by this faith has given reality around me a weight that I intuitively believe it deserves. I would never have become a person of faith if I had not had the freedom to doubt. If I had never doubted, I would have continued to redefine the word knowledge as faith, and I would have kept my thinking very narrow. In the hours following my daughter's birth, I wrote a letter to her future self, and in it I warned her against those who know that they know that they know. In other words, those who think that they've got everything about God, the universe, and the human race all figured out. And the reason this came immediately to my mind in those moments after my first child was born, sitting next to her infant-sized hospital bed, was because I was never duly warned myself. Instead, I feel like I was sold a narrow version of a blessed assurance by which you knew that doubt and self-criticism were unnecessary and even sinful. I was expected to check my brain at the door. And it's my fervent hope that my daughter, my other daughter, and my son never know what it is like to live in such a stultifying, oppressive world. I want their minds to be free to think and to marvel at God's mysteries with no fear of reprisal when they doubt. Emphasis on mystery, marvel at God's mysteries, a Christian concept that we used to be more comfortable with. So by God's grace, she will be free. But Jesus said, blessed are those who believe without seeing. Well, that's you and that's me. And we've literally never seen Jesus of Nazareth, the human, walking on earth like he did 2,000 years ago. But if I'm still being more honest, I can admit to myself there have been times when I have actually seen, when I've witnessed God's transformative power healing wounds and scars. There have been times when I have witnessed the hole in someone's side, or more accurately, someone's broken heart mended. And to have heard the testimony of that person after the fact, a testimony to the resurrection, restorative power of Jesus Christ. And then when I heard that story from their words, from their mouth, told with authenticity, I was no longer one who believed without seeing, but rather I saw and then believed. I saw their scars and I believed. Call me blessed or not, I don't care. These things I have seen and they've given me hope. So I encourage you, if you have a story that might increase someone else's faith, tell it. The story we read today was written down to serve as a testimony to us and others who have not seen, so that we might believe. And I think it's helping. Your story can serve as a testimony as well to others, so tell it. But if you are still in doubt, stay. there is room for you here. I may often join you, or more often than a pastor would care to admit. But the deepest faith is discovered in the midst of, not on the other side even, of such doubt. Even as you doubt, your faith is something real, holding you together. And I thank God for all of it, even the doubt, and the faith that sometimes finds me. The doubt and the faith. For me, today, I thank God especially for the doubt, because of what it's led to. Perhaps someday you will too. This has been the Northwood Podcast. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe to the podcast by way of whatever app you use to listen, or leave a comment. These points of engagement drive more traffic our way. Or check out our website, www.indyncc.org. And also check out the other podcasts produced by the All Indiana Podcast Network. Until next time, this has been the Northwood Podcast. I am Heath Jones. Peace.